Hi, today we're going to talk about art in the tomb. So let's start with the Neolithic time period and people and artworks. This is a jar from between 2650 and 2350 BC. I'm going to talk a little more about the designs in a minute. So Neolithic China, this is the earliest China that we have archaeological examples of. This is 10,000 BC. Neolithic era went to about 8,000 years later when metalwork came about. It's characterized by the development of settled communities that relied on farming and domesticated animals rather than hunting and gathering. So we're talking about established communities. In China, as in other areas of the world, Neolithic settlements grew up along the main river systems. So the two earliest Chinese societies in this Neolithic time period have yielded us information through their artifacts. The two cultures developed their own traditions and worked mostly independently of each other with distinctive architecture, distinctive burial customs, but they did share some communication and cultural exchange, we believe. So the two areas that these early societies that we have evidence of were one was in the Central Plains and one was on the coast. First, I'll talk about the Neolithic society that was on the Central Plains in China. They produced pottery painted with red and black pigments. This shows us early examples of use of the brush for linear compositions, meaning there's a lot of line work here. There's definitely a suggestion of movement, which establishes that as a pretty ancient tradition. So we're going to see movement in design and in lines for a long time. And here's where it all started. Now, the Neolithic seaside culture, they developed along the eastern seaboard and along the lower Yangtze River. Potters along the coast also developed techniques of burnishing, like rubbing and scraping into things, and incising, which would indicate creating texture with a sharp tool in the clay. Craftsmen were also credited with developing the first potter's wheel in China in this area. And you can notice some abstract representations of natural creatures, such as frogs, perhaps, in this piece that suggest they're symbolic of either a costume worn by a shaman or suggestive of the transformation that a shaman believes he goes through during rituals. So again, a lot of line suggesting movement around the vessel here. And you can see it's pretty simple with the colors of things that you would find in nature. So they're crushing berries and insects to create the pigment to paint on these vessels. Now, another aspect of Neolithic cultures is the aspect of jade carving. So, in both of these Neolithic cultures, the use of jade was probably the most lasting contribution to Chinese civilization. Polished stone implements were common to all Neolithic settlements. These stones were fashioned into tools and ornaments. This is an ornament right here. They think it was some kind of pendant. And jade was chosen both for its hardness and strength and its ability to withstand impacts by tools. So I'm going to talk a little more about this, but it was a very hard stone. So it could be used for cutting things, but could also be used functionally. Here's a photo, an image of raw jade. So jade must be worked with an abrasive sand and a process of slicing and drilling. And you can imagine how challenging that would be at a time before metal tools. Here is a jade object. This is Now the letters BI, they're actually pronounced B, even though it looks like bi. So this is a ritual object. We've found these in tombs of people that had a high rank in society. We're unclear what the function is, but there is a relationship possibly between the earth and the heavens. It was found, we think it was laid on people's chests, and possibly it was a portal for their soul to go through. But it's a very powerful stone, and there is definitely something to be said for the fact that it was found in wealthy upper-class people's graves. And this shape is the principal jade object that was found in Neolithic culture sites. Jade was very important for making tools and weapons. And here we have a weapon with a very decorative, gorgeous turquoise handle here. Jade suggested power. And that's really important. I think that you'll notice that even in the current use of jade today. But the power to shape and control it physically, and also the ownership of it, demonstrated power over others. And we're going to go next into the Bronze Age. Here we have an altar set from the late 11th century BC, or BCE. So I'm gonna go into how important, how significant discovering and harnessing bronze was. So the Bronze Age is a major turning point. It's in the era of the Shang and the Zhou dynasties that's generally known as the Bronze Age of China. And bronze was used to fashion weapons, make parts of chariots, used in ritual vessels, and it played a really important role in the material culture of the time. If you look at an auction house like Sotheby's, one of the high-end ones, you'll see a lot of ritual bronzes there. Iron appeared in China towards the end of the time period during the Eastern Zhou dynasty. So bronze is really the first metal to be worked and used. And let's start talking about the Shang dynasty. Shang craftsmen had a full command of the artistic and technical language developed in the late Neolithic cultures. And while Bronze Age jade workers had better tools, metal tools, the great patience and skill that craftsmen of the Neolithic cultures, they were more skillful. It seemed like it was lacking a little bit during the Bronze Age, and perhaps that was because the focus was on the craftsmanship of bronze more than jade. While we don't know the function of ritual jades in a Neolithic culture, we do have records from the Bronze Age that inform us that jades were used in sacrificial offerings to gods and ancestors, in burial rites, for recording treaties between states, and in formal ceremonies at the courts of kings. And here is a special jade tablet. This is in your book. Now, the formal art elements that we can describe just by looking at it are that it's a thin trapezoid shape with a whole board at the end. The stone is yellow ivory, gray, and ochre. You can't see it yet, but I'll show you on the next slide. There's an image of a bird on one side, and then an image of a face with prominent eyes on the other side. And let's look at the tablet inscription. So it's dated 1786 CE by a Chinese emperor who owned the piece. So it wasn't actually created in 1786, but the Chinese emperor marked the piece for the period he owned it, which is interesting. That seems a little bit different than how we would handle antiques today, wouldn't you agree? He understood this to be an eagle and a bear, and he believed it was an ancient award for bravery. He believed the work was done by one of the earliest dynasties, either the Shang or the Zhou. And the idea that he wanted this, knowing that it was from an earlier dynasty, kind of indicates or suggests a love for antiquity even many, many years ago in China. You'll see today that Chinese antiques that they go for huge sums of money at auction, and Chinese people are really, really um, celebratory of their history and want to own pieces from their past. And that tradition has happened for a long time. Okay, I mentioned that on the tablet it's a relief sculpture, and I just want to define that for you. So a relief sculpture is a work of object that projects, or it's a sculpture that projects but belongs to the background surface on which it is carved. And the example I've pulled up here for you is from the Parthenon frieze. So different in that a sculpture would be freestanding and it would be carved in the round and you would be able to look at it from all sides. You can really only appreciate a relief from one side because the rest of the surface is flat. And this is an example of a high relief sculpture. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a low relief. So you might recognize this. Here's your common penny. So this is a low relief image or sculpture. The low relief barely stands out from the background. And continuing to talk about the jade tablet of the Neolithic period, it was found near the mouth of the Yellow River. And I'm going to talk to you soon about the significance of the Yellow River. Thank you. So here we have the bird of prey on one side and the stylized face with prominent eyes. Pretty cool there. I love that the high gloss of the surface makes it so easy to see them. So notice some of the elements that really stand out when I look at it are that it's very symmetrical with, if you drew an imaginary line down the center of it, it's almost a mirror image on both sides, right? Very scrolly, kind of organic lines. A lot of references to nature here, both in the, the designs below. Really like those. I just wanted to give you a minute to look at those.